This is a meeting of the Policy Subcommittee of the School Committee. And we have a few items on our agenda today. The first one of which is a review and approval of the minutes. But right just before we get to that, just as a reminder, this is being recorded. All right, so have subcommittee members had an opportunity to review the minutes from September 8th? All right, see Jennifer says yes. Jennifer, would you also like to move the minutes?
I would.
Okay, do we have a second? All right, thank you, Andy. Jennifer?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So next up, if necessary, it was going to be a discussion of the staff vaccine mandate, which was approved by the full school committee. So we don't necessarily need to get in further discussion on it unless anyone has something they'd like to bring up. All right, so now we can move on to our next item, which is an update on student vaccines. Casey, I don't know if you have anything to add on that. If there's anything new since we last met about a week ago regarding student vaccines.
No, I don't have any new information other than just to for folks to keep updated on the different vaccine clinics that we have upcoming.
Okay.
Information on our website.
All right. I've also been keeping in touch with our state representatives about whether they think there will be any action taken at the state level that would enable us to start mandating that students or a subset of students take the vaccine so that we could add to our immunizations policy, potentially a provision for COVID-19. I see that Tricia Laham is now logging in. Tricia, do you have anything to add to that about the status of students and vaccines?
Sorry, I'm just getting on. So do I have anything to add to the status of students?
Right, because there's a lot of interest in the community to have a vaccine mandate of some sort for our students. My current understanding on this is that we would need some cooperation at the state level in order to move forward as comprehensively as some members of the public.
That is my understanding. Yeah, we have not gone that route ever with mandating a vaccine that was not mandated at the state level. So I think another couple of districts might be doing that, but I do not have more information on that.
All right. Now you mentioned that some other districts are doing that. Do you know what challenges, if any, that they have faced with that rollout, or whether they're just hoping that the state will follow them shortly?
I actually have reached out to the two districts that I think might be doing it and have not gotten that answer yet. But I think they are probably hoping that the state's going to follow through and require that.
All right, thank you. And I'll ask just subcommittee members, what are your general thoughts about how we should be proceeding on a student vaccine mandate? I think there are a lot of ways that we could go about it. There could be, once we have state approval and legal cover for it, whether we would want to mandate it for students who are eligible, whether we would want to do something more broadly than that. Anyone have thoughts?
I'm having internet connection issues, so I'm trying to go to a different spot. My personal preference would be to wait for more direction from the state, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. And Valerie, I think I saw that you want to comment on this. Go ahead.
I was going to say that Lexington, which is one of the districts that does have at least a partial mandate, is doing it on an activities-based with an activities-based metric. So student athletes, and I'm not sure what all in terms of activities, but they're voluntary activities in order to participate. And I believe that that's how they're getting, I don't want to say around, but that's how they're navigating their mandate in lieu of a broader statewide policy. And I think it's worth exploring the contours of that and how they're doing it.
Okay. Andy?
Panel 4 has expressed a desire to have a kind of robust discussion of any student mandate. They're hoping that we would give them time to have a discussion like that before moving forward. I think because even the staff mandate, there were some differing views on the panel, and I think it's going to be a lot more complicated with a student mandate.
All right. I agree. I think Lexington seems to have a very interesting approach to this. And we could wait for the panel 4 discussion, of course. Any other thoughts on student vaccines, Jennifer?
Just to clarify, Andy, are they beginning to engage in that conversation? I don't know, I mean, if it's on the radar for us, or at least something we're contemplating, if they can begin, if they are able to begin those discussions, that would be helpful in informing our conversations going forward. Are you in contact with them that you could share that, or should we do that?
I mean, if the school committee were interested in hearing from them on this topic, we could almost certainly get it onto their agenda for the 24th, which I think is their next meeting.
So David, do you think maybe you could network with Suzanne? Oh, I think Suzanne's on the call maybe. And I don't know, I would be interested in getting their input as we continue along with that. I think the community would like that as well. So that would be helpful in conjunction with Tricia and the information we're getting from the school side. And then, I'm inclined to wait for something from the state, and I prefer things that are, fully FDA approved and vetted. That's my comfort level, but I am interested in it. And I would just to Val's point about the sports thing, when I was reading up on this, last week and over the weekend, it seems that districts that are doing this in the country are doing it more on this for student mandate is more around the sports. So I think that's a common theme right now. I haven't really seen, and I haven't dug deeply, but I haven't seen a lot of people who are doing this as a student mandate right now. That doesn't mean they're not out there. It's just what I happened to come across when I was looking. So I would like to wait for something from the state, from some direction, but I am interested.
Just to follow up, I think that the rationale for that, Jennifer, is because their activities, so I think actually band is included in some of these, because they're activities where you produce a lot of, where you're breathing heavily, or you're potentially spitting, or doing all kinds of things where we know that COVID transmission can occur.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I think that makes a lot of sense. So maybe if we can get some more guidance around that. I don't know if there's guidance from the state, Tricia, around sports or any of that.
I haven't seen it. Lexington is one of the districts that I meet with frequently, and I had reached out to my counterpart, Karen, and I think everybody been pretty busy the last couple of work days. So I have not heard from her. And I think those who are looking at, just as you said, some of the sports and extracurriculars, which present some of its own challenges, but I think that's one way some are going.
So should I go ahead and ask panel 4 to tee up a discussion of this for their next meeting, which I think is next Friday?
Yes, I think that would be helpful, because it's important that we not wait too long, because it sounds like some of us would be interested in the Lexington approach, and it would be helpful to know whether panel 4 agrees with that. And also if they have any recommendations beyond what Lexington has done. Because unfortunately, it can take a while for the state to take a statewide action.
All right, will do.
All right, thank you.
I mean, I think
Anyone else? Go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just going to say, it can't hurt to ask them to start to think about it. And we're not saying we're going to make any decisions, but I think it would be right now. But I think if they could start, I think it may take them a few meetings before they may even have some sort of widespread agreement, not consensus. Sorry, keep going.
No, that's fine. All right, that sounds good. Anyone else have anything to say about student vaccines and the policy for them? No? Okay, so we can now move on to the next item, which is an update on an update on our students who are out for COVID-19 related reasons, and whether they are able to connect to their studies. So as all of you recall, we had this discussion more robustly in our meeting on the 8th. The subcommittee had recommended by a 4-0 vote to the full school committee that we adopted the statement that was presented to us. The full school committee, however, decided not to take action on that statement. I think mainly out of concern that we wouldn't be able to deliver on the perception of what it is that we were promising for our students, and concerns about some of the pressure that might put on staff and building leaders. Also, there were concerns expressed around equity between grade levels and equity between schools in terms of who would be receiving what while absent from school. So based on the discussion that we had on the 8th, as well as at the full school committee, do any members or staff have any further thoughts on where to go from here on that issue? Because I still remain concerned that I do not want our students to effectively be punished for acting responsibly and staying home from school. And I am hearing that we do have students who are testing positive. We do have staff that are testing positive. We do have people who are out. So I think it's critically important that we ensure that they remain as connected, as safely, and as pedagogically prudent. Does anyone have an update for us on how that's been going so far in terms of providing education to students who are absent?
David, the only update I have is a number of us did meet today on senior staff, but just part of us, and then we'll discuss at the fuller senior staff meeting tomorrow morning. One thing that we did discuss that could be relevant here is whether or not the subcommittee would look at the current attendance policy and see where there might be some leniency, or I don't know if we could suspend parts of it to get to that piece that you're concerned about, not punishing students with the attendance. So there is that piece there. But, you know, I think the senior staff still remains concerned about overpromising actions from teachers that we can't guarantee.
And I guess, Casey, my question that I raised at full school committee is still out there, which is what DESE is going to require of us. And I think that was not clear on the webinar that they had with some of the senior staff, was whether that half day was a requirement on districts, or whether it was essentially voluntary and we could mark students absent or not.
Is this around the word activities? I just want to be.
I think that Megan's on. I think that they defined activities to mean a half day of participation. So whether it was audio or video or just participation with their classroom activities. So it essentially is a half day like any other half day, but it had to be audio or video, I believe. So the question is whether that's optional or mandatory. And I think that question with DESE is still out there unless Megan has an update.
Certainly not me.
I think we can follow up on that, Val. I mean, we didn't talk about it today, so I think that question is probably still out to DESE.
All right, Stephen?
Is there any update, Casey, maybe from you about, well, I don't know why you, Casey, what Leslie is determining for what options the district can feasibly provide? I mean, is there some update on how the administration is currently planning on this?
I don't have any more than what we presented last week.
Okay.
Suzanne? You're on mute, Suzanne.
Sorry. I think we have several different issues, really. One is, attendance and what does that mean and how important is it, and how do we define whether somebody is in attendance? So that's one concern. And then a related concern, but a different concern, is what kind of educational instruction and experience is someone going to have if they are not physically present in school? And again, that is very sticky, and it's not clear what we can offer at this point. It's also not clear where we're going to settle on negotiations on that. So there's two big separate issues, related but still separate, and I don't have the answers to either one, but those are two big concerns.
Now, the next negotiations meeting is scheduled for the 17th. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, Andy, you certainly can jump in. You know, I mean, there's some thought that some teachers are doing what it is they need to do to allow the kids to be in attendance remotely, whether that's audio or visual or some combination, and or, you know, work that needs to be done. So some of that's probably going on already. And I know that Anthony at the high school had something that went out on Monday, just last night, Sunday night, perhaps, whatever he does, his weekly newsletter about different suggestions that might be happening at the high school. So, you know, it's hard to know, as Jess likes to say, how much we memorialize something and how much we let the teachers make decisions and figure this out.
I'm just wondering how much of this is about technological challenges, how much of it is about needing to formally negotiate what it is that educators would be expected to provide, and how much of it is just a sense that it's not pedagogically appropriate to be offering live streaming, for instance. Casey, see that you have your virtual hand up.
Thank you. So from the senior staff perspective, much of it is that we don't have any, it's not technical. We certainly have the owls. We certainly showed that we could do it last year. I mean, it's not ideal because we want all our kids in person, right? That would be the most pedagogically sound practice. But for us, the biggest piece is not having a formally negotiated set of conditions that can allow us to mark students present as defined by DESE. So I think the concern there again is that there's a statement out there that lists what we hope to do, knowing perhaps that we can't deliver on that because we don't have an agreement that sets the conditions.
So this is all a bit puzzling to me as the negotiations chair, because nobody has ever approached the school committee with suggestions about what it is we're supposed to be securing. And so, you know, it's not like the current roadblock is negotiations, because we haven't been charged to negotiate anything. And in fact, the whole topic has never even come up. So yeah. This whole discussion puzzles me greatly.
Well, Stephen, are you going to jump in? I mean, I'm reflecting on the Lawrence situation and the letter we got from Lawrence teachers having concerns about what they thought they were asked, the second grade teacher was asked to do. And so I think the union did jump in with that. And I think that they are expecting that there would be some negotiations. You're right, Andy, the school committee hasn't charged us with that, but I think the union has jumped in. Stephen, what do you want to say about that?
I think we should still stake out our position about what value we want to defend and what the policy recommendation would be, regardless of whether we would be successful in negotiating that position with the BEU. I think that that step is incumbent upon us, regardless of whether negotiations permit us to do it. And then if negotiations force us to do something differently, then that will be a subsequent communication. But if we think we have the technological capacity to broadcast classrooms, it's different if we don't think it's pedagogically sound, of course. But if the technology is there, then it's about us putting out a statement saying that we're committed to ensuring that kids who get COVID or are quarantined because of COVID are going to get learning opportunities. And here are some of the ways that we're going to move forward on that.
I agree with Stephen. And again, this is a statement. It's not a policy. So it's a bit softer than setting something in stone. It's just showing that it's the will of the committee, that we have an expectation, a desire to see that our students who are absent for COVID-19 related reasons are able to still connect to their learning communities. So it is, I mean, I'm glad to hear that it's not technical issues that are standing in the way. That was my initial perception, that was a large part of it. Jennifer?
Casey, or there's, so I guess for me, I'm still thinking about the technical pieces and trying to envision what that would look like. Even if we're saying we're not even talking about pre-literate kids, do we have owls and people with expertise in owls in every classroom? Because I don't think just a laptop with Zoom is gonna be a meaningful experience. So I do have some concerns about our technology. I mean, I'd love for someone to tell me that it's not holding us up, but I kind of feel like there is some technical piece to it. I think at the high school, I think that we heard a lot more conversation about the owls and people's comfort level with using them, or just their technological savvy with them and experience with them. But I was more concerned about our K-8 program than the high school. So I guess I'm still wondering about the technical piece, because I don't think every classroom has an owl. We don't even physically have them to give out.
Yeah, no, you're accurate. We certainly don't have enough owls for every classroom. When I was answering David's question about technical, it wasn't, I was more talking about whether or not we have the materials necessary, or the physical equipment necessary to allow students to live stream into the classroom and have access that way.
I'm sorry, the answer is yes, Casey?
What's that? I was answering, equipment wise, we are equipped to do it. Do we have owls for every single classroom? No, but could we utilize laptops and cameras and microphones and other ways to allow audio and visual into the classroom? Yes.
I'm just wondering, would it be like a meaningful dynamic experience though for students? Like how, I don't, maybe this is not something I need to worry myself about, but I'm just wondering how students who are home would interact with students who are in the classroom and the educator with just like with just a laptop. I'm just trying to visualize what that would look like in a meaningful way. Like it might be one thing to provide the audio and visual, but even then, that's what's great about the owls, is that they pick up on the sound and students can hear other students' responses. And then the teacher could be near, like say the whiteboard, and could pick up what they're doing. I'm just trying to envision what that would look like with just a laptop. Just having had prior experience with just even zooming in like observations for student teachers, that was not really helpful for the person at home, because no one was moving the laptop around to like observe the classroom as a whole. So I guess could we provide audio and a visual of like one scene, but it depends on what happens in front of that camera, what passes in front of it. Do you guys know what I'm saying? Or I'm just concerned about how dynamic and meaningful and engaged that would keep students. So
right.
I guess that's the technology piece I'm just wondering about, because I am afraid of promising to families. And I think even though, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Casey, I think that even if it's just a statement, people will treat it like a policy, because it will be our statement and we are putting our name on it. So if we do something, I just feel like we have to have thought through a lot of this. And I don't know that the district is quite there yet. Maybe, go ahead, Casey, I'm sorry.
No, I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, Casey.
Can I ask, feel free to say this is a bad idea, that you've done this already and I just missed it. But I would love to take a step back and acknowledge, if there were the technology to provide any absent child with a learning experience as meaningful as the one that's face-to-face in the classroom, then absences in general would be an entirely different phenomenon. So it seems to me that we're tasked with thinking of a special category of student experience, which is a student with COVID, which is likely to be a category that has frequent members over the next year. that we cannot possibly expect to give these students, given the budget for PSB, given the realities of the world, we can't expect that these students will have the same level of meaningful interaction with the classroom as they would face-to-face. To me, the question is there some kind of experience that we could deliver to these students that is better than nothing? And I know also that we're boxed in by the fact that there are quite explicit parameters about what we have to provide as a school district for students. But I guess my question for you all is it possible to conceive of a special category where we could provide some limited array of services? Susan, did you have a thought on that?
I did, but I'm not a policy committee member, so I don't know, David. If you-
I just checked in.
Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, so I 100% agree, Stephen, with what you just said. And I think that we might be losing the forest for the trees a little bit. Just to reiterate something I said the other night, I think there are 3 different issues here, and I wonder if maybe we can prioritize them a little bit. I mean, the first issue that everybody talks about is the policy question and DESE, but I'm wondering if we can kind of flip it and ask the pedagogical question first and say, for students who are out of school for some significant number of days, what is the best or most appropriate educational experience we can give them that's better than sitting at home by themselves? And again, I think it's going to differ by grade level, because I think if there's largely a lecture going on in an AP class in high school, that's very different from a student needing one-on-one intensive time with a specialist or with a para. And that's very different from a student who's in K-5. So I'm fully sold that this is going to look different at different grade bands. But I think maybe we can just start with, what does that look like? And in a way, the teacher is responsible for the student catching up, as Leslie said, if they're out. And so it's actually a lot less work for the teacher, hypothetically speaking, to flip on Zoom and have a student at least be halfway sort of following what's going on, and then try to catch that student up, rather than fully not have them have any participation at all and then try to catch up that student. And everyone in their class is going to miss some different number of days. And I think it's going to quickly become far harder for a teacher to do that if they don't have something like this where at least the student can pay attention. I mean, I think the other 2 issues are important, but I guess I'd prioritize them. Number 1, pedagogy by grade bands. And number 2, I would prioritize the whole set of cultural questions that go along with it. Again, I think Leslie said it well, which is principals have been trying to say it, come to school, come to school, come to school. You have to do whatever you can to get the kids into the building. And now that cultural change has to happen for principals, it has to happen for teachers, it has to happen for parents and older students for sure. I think third is the policy question. Of all the issues, I'm least concerned about DESE. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm least concerned about DESE. I'm mildly concerned about what we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, or not beginning, 10 minutes in, where we're talking about what are the penalties that the district imposes that we can just vote and lift off. But I guess I don't necessarily want to anchor on what does or doesn't count for a day according to DESE. I'd much rather anchor on what makes the most sense for kids and teachers ultimately, and let's start there. And I would rather arrange the adults around that experience. So that's all I would want to say. Just pedagogy by grade band, then thinking about the cultural issues that we have to make that happen, and then the sort of the internal policy which we have control over. And I would just put DESE and DESE's policies last of all. I do not want to wait for DESE. That's all.
So,
Go ahead, Valerie.
so I was not implying, Susan, that I wanted to wait for DESE. My comment about DESE was whether we went through a long planning process and then we're told that robust education that we provided was not sufficient. I completely agree that we need to figure out by grade band what the most efficient way for educators and for students is for them to learn in as robust a way as possible. I also think that we need to not lose sight of the fact that we're trying to keep students who maybe have mild symptoms home from school so that we don't have a lot of spread, either of COVID or other viruses. So I also want to keep that at sort of top of mind of why it is that we're doing this is also to prevent disease spread within the school and keep as many kids in school as feasible. So, you know, I sort of also prioritize that in what you just prioritized, Susan, as public health piece as well, so that we can keep as many kids having an in-person education as possible.
Jennifer?
I kind of feel like we've come back around to where we were at the school committee meeting the other night, where we said I feel like, I don't remember now, I can't remember if it was at policy or full school committee, where we ended up with Leslie Ryan Miller's putting it sort of in her lap and this district's lap to say, so what does that look like? And it's only been a few days. So I don't know if there's a plan for follow-up, David, where we're going to ask them to come back to talk about these questions. What does that look like per grade band, and discuss that with us so we can make a plan? I guess I feel like we just had the same conversation we already had the other night with the same ideas, and we're back to the same place. I think we need to, it sounds like, and maybe I'm wrong, that we need to hear from the district about what their plans are for students, because we're talking about what's the best pedagogy, what is appropriate for grade bands. And I think that's something that we need to get from them as the Office of Teaching and Learning.
I agree. It would be very useful to have that input, and it has only been a few days. Although we did get some new information today, at least for me personally, and I think a couple others, there had been some concern about whether we were actually equipped to be providing live stream access for our students if that were the direction we chose to go in. And I'm glad to hear that we were technologically able to. It's now more a question of whether we think it would be appropriate, whether it would be a meaningful experience for the student. And to Stephen's point, I agree that something would be better than nothing. I'm not saying we're doing nothing, but something would be better than just sort of saying, well, if it's not the ideal experience that one would have in the classroom, then let's not do it at all.
In
I
some
don't really
cases,
think that's a solution.
in
So
some cases, David, I mean, I think that's true of like upper secondary, but it's not going to be true for like kindergarten.
right, I agree.
sorry,
I think by grade bands. So for high school lecture style courses, I would think that live streaming would be fine, just my personal belief. For lower grades, it certainly would be different. And that's where hearing back from the Office of Teaching and Learning will be helpful. I do hope that this is a priority at the Office of Teaching and Learning, because we do have absences piling up. We do have students testing positive. This is not going to suddenly get better. So I want to make sure that we do have something concrete that we can then go off of for our next policy meeting and a subsequent school committee meeting. Jennifer?
So will you be following up with OTL about the conversation to see what
Yes.
we can come back and, okay, great. Thanks.
Andy?
You mentioned a subsequent policy meeting followed by a full school committee meeting. I totally get the urgency of this issue. And should we go ahead and try to schedule a policy meeting ahead of the next school committee meeting so that this can come up for action if people are ready?
Well, I would want to make sure that the Office of Teaching and Learning actually has something concrete for us to consider first. So I'm going to follow up with them and try to get a better idea as to what their timetable is. If it looks like they might have something relatively soon, then we could go ahead and schedule another policy meeting for sooner than our regular October one. If it looks like it's going to take longer than what I would personally like, then maybe we just have that as our regular October meeting. So I'll follow up with everyone about the timing of it. Stephen?
Can we do this iteratively, where we start with a just brainstorming a possible statement, where we say something like, where the technology is available and the necessary classroom adaptations are minimal, we want to move ahead as quickly as possible with introducing learning experiences to quarantining students within the judgment of the teacher. So for instance, if you're a teacher of an AP class and you have kids who are quarantining, the district will support you in procuring an owl for your classroom for the duration of your students' quarantine or something like that. And for conditions, for the many conditions where the technology is harder to procure, the educational opportunity is less valuable, we will be working with OTL as much as possible to create, augment, improve those kinds of learning opportunities. And then going beyond that, also we need to be thinking at the very earliest about kids with special needs, because we can't tack them on at the end of this kind of statement where we're just extending this at the last minute kids with special needs. But the point being that we'll look for low-hanging fruit to make education extensible where currently possible, where recommended by teachers, looking to the teacher's expertise. Last comment, like to me also, ideally this would require minimal bargaining if the adaptation burden is very, very low. So there's perhaps some movement we can make right away while still working on it with OTL. I'll stop.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts? Jennifer?
Just that I think I would be more inclined just to sort of streamline the work to wait to hear from OTL before we draft anything else. Because what they tell us might really help us draft the language and make it without argue, without the debate between us all, without the information. I think maybe we should wait until we hear from them to draft.
All right.
People want to wordsmith away, by all means.
Andy, have something else to say?
No, just except what I pretty much said before, which is that I would hope our target is going to be our next school committee meeting rather than our next policy meeting, which is a month from now.
Yes. Okay. Right, there's nothing that would obligate us to go through policy first in order to at least receive an update or to have further discussion, because we already have addressed this at policy with sort of that first statement, and we could potentially be working off of that one again. So I don't want to get too fixated in terms of the order. It just depends on the timing. So maybe we'll have another policy meeting ahead of the discussion at full school committee, or maybe it goes straight to full school committee. I think a lot depends on the Office of Teaching and Learning and the pace at which it wants to move with this. All right, so next up on our agenda is the school admissions policy. And this was brought to my attention by Megan. So Megan, go ahead. If you'd like to tell us about what you're thinking here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your time. And I bring the delight of a non-COVID based policy to you guys to address and think about something a little bit different from everything that you've been dealing with recently. So in reviewing the policy for admissions, section J, right? Section I, admissions, really looking at the residency policy and most specifically the verification of residency component. So over the last few years, doing this work with families here in the district, we've observed some discrepancies or challenges that either the staff face or families face in working with within the policy as it's written. So I have three sort of components to bring to you to think about. One is the specific list of documents. So that's the category A, B, and C as identified in the policy itself. These do not perfectly align with what the district actually asks families for. And I would like to align these. The reason we ask for the things we ask for is a little outdated. The types of documents that families provide now, I don't know when this list was drafted, but I suspect it was long before, for instance, DocuSign was even a thing that existed. So we have realigned what we asked for, and I'm happy to go through, comparing the two and discussing why we ask for what we ask for. The second piece is one of the documents that is outlined here, which is called the Landlord Affidavit. The language in that affidavit has presented some challenges, both for families and for landlords, being willing to comply or being able to comply with providing this document. And then the last piece is the subsequent enrollment annual renewal. And so I know this policy, part of the policy was written prior to just at the time of centralization of enrollment for the district. And having been centralized now for about 5-6 years, we've done this, we've tried our best to comply with the policy. However, the way that our office is staffed and budgeted for staffing, we're not able to meet the mandate. So I would like to have a policy that is actually attainable, but still meet the intent behind what the policy is written. So I can't check all 7,000 families single-handedly, for instance, and comply and get them to comply, because it takes a lot of work to help families get all the way to providing things to us as requested. But I still want to be able to meet this policy's intent. You know, who are we checking? Why are we checking? When are we checking? Where's the discretion? And what is the intention of asking? Because some districts never ask. We ask every family every year as it's written. So these are questions I bring. That one in particular, I bring to you as to what is the intent behind the policy, so that we could perhaps revise it in a way that it is attainable. And families can appreciate what they're being asked for as well.
All right, any questions for Megan? Okay, so Megan, perhaps the next steps on this, I'd be happy to propose some changes to the policy that will meet what you're looking for. And obviously you can do the same, and we can work on that together. And then perhaps have something ready for the next regular policy subcommittee meeting.
That sounds fantastic.
Go over it. All right. Any more thoughts from anyone? Currently, Megan, how do you process someone's residency application? Is it you personally who's overlooking everything? Just you
Yes,
alone?
it's me, and I have one other staff member. And then we have a half-time attendance officer to service the entire district, every new enrollment, every withdrawal, and every residency verification request that comes through, and residency investigation.
I see. And residency investigations, are those randomly selected or based on someone reporting that perhaps someone's no longer a resident? Both?
Both, yeah, and as it's written in the policy, we do get community members who notify us that they have concerns regarding somebody's residency. We also have procedures in place for, you know, sometimes children report things themselves at school. Sometimes we get returned mail, you know, why did this come back to us undeliverable? And that sometimes produces further information, but they're not random. The investigations, those are always based on some piece of initial evidence.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Are you allowed to say anything about the scale of that issue? Like roughly how many investigations a year are you needing to undertake, and how many of those result in a finding that, yeah, somebody actually shouldn't be enrolled?
Yeah, so the investigations, I'm not so worried about those. I feel like that particular part, as the policy is written, we're able to follow that. It's the annual renewal of residency that is the piece that's the scale that literally asks me to ask every single family in the district for their both to sign an affidavit and to provide documentation, which then you have to look at, follow up, track, return back and say, no, that wasn't right. Can you give me something different? Scalability there is a real challenge with what I'm working with.
Something that, while we have you on, that is related question. We received an email from, a couple emails from members of the public who are homeschooling currently due to COVID-19 concerns. And they're wondering what happens when they decide that they want to bring their student back into school in person, and whether the student would be able to attend the previous school that the student had been attending, even if they moved to another part of town. So I've seen that question come up a few times.
Me too. So any student who withdraws their student to homeschool, they are withdrawn from the district, you know, so legally they are withdrawn from the public schools of Brookline, and they have to re-enroll. in order for us to get them back into the system for our educators to have access to their information and continue to work with them. So they do have to come back through my office, start all over, present their residency again. And sometimes, like you mentioned, they do move in the in-between. So that's one of the reasons we need to make sure they're still here in Brookline, eligible students. And then in terms of the school assignment, we do our utmost to allow families to attend the school that they prefer if they ask. If they were members of a school community prior, and they still live in a buffer zone within that area, we generally do our best to allow that to happen. If they've moved across town, we might have a conversation, because sometimes that's not necessarily as easily doable feat for the family that they need to think about and consider. If that's going to be the smartest choice for their day-to-day lives. So that's a conversation we often have with them. And then it is based on the enrollment numbers, which I think you guys all know I take very good care to keep track of. And so, if we do have one of those pressure points in a particular grade level and a family no longer lives in that zone, then we might need to ask them to attend their now new neighborhood school. Doesn't happen very often, but we do need to preserve the right so that we don't overcrowd the classrooms, because we don't know if or when those folks will come back, or if a whole bunch of new kids have come in while they were gone. Okay. So never a promise. It's easier to deliver when we don't promise.
Any other questions for Megan? No? Okay, Megan, do you have any other questions for us or some other issues you'd like us to be considering?
At this time, I don't. I think there's another piece of this particular section, but I think it's more a teaching and learning question. So I'll leave that to them if and when they prefer to bring that to you, dealing with first grade age eligibility.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so next up is new business. Does anyone have any new business? Jennifer?
I'm sorry, David, I'm not sure if this is exactly new business, but can we do a follow-up or a wrap back around
It's terrible to be you.
I'm sorry. Oh, on the SRO question, we did make a policy decision, and then we were going to follow back up on what the district was going to put in place. And I don't know if there's an update on that, or if we could put that on a future agenda to come back around, or if that's something for full school committee.
So I think it's something that is for both policy and full school committee, probably more for full school committee. I've been hoping that we would get a presentation from either the Office of Student Services, I think it would make the most sense from Student Services, although maybe from Teaching and Learning, regarding what the findings are from meetings with the principals about what it is that each school building would like to see in place to ensure that our students receive at least comparable services to what they had during the SRO program. We did make that commitment as a school committee, and I think it's a commitment that we really need to keep. I'm still waiting to hear back from leadership, but I'm told that we will be getting an update soon. And as soon as we have that, we can take it up either at policy, if we have a policy meeting around the time that we get that update, or for the full school committee. I would hope for the full school committee, because my understanding initially was we would have something in early September, and now we're heading toward late September. So hopefully we'll have something soon.
Thank you. I appreciate the follow-up.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Well, Steve, you were going to say something under new business? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating today. And we next meet, I think, in October, unless there's need for another meeting before then, in which case I would reach out to everybody. All right. So enjoy your evening.